Hello everybody, and welcome back to my card game tutorial series. In this video we will be working on sending cards to the discard pile. We'll be doing that by utilizing and coding two trainer cards. That will be Bill, which will allow us to draw two cards. As you can see, Bill was sent to the discard pile and we drew two cards. And the Professor Oak card, which will allow us to discard our hand to draw 7 new cards. In the next video, we will work on creating an animation for sending cards to the discard pile, allowing the user to have an infinite hand, and layering the objects in our game appropriately. So if you're interested in this, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you would like to download these program files and support this series, be sure to check out my Patreon linked in the description below. Let's begin. The first thing we want to do is create the variables we will use to represent our discard pile. And we will be using the following variables. So we're going to create an array for our discard pile. We're going to create a variable to maintain the number of cards we have in that discard pile. We have our X and Y positions, and we also placed the discard object in our room. But now we need to create this object. And in this object we are going to create one variable for now. We're going to set player equal to object player, and then we'll create a draw event, and we will draw all the cards in the discard pile. This is all the code we will need to draw our discard pile. But in order to use these cards, I want to create an area on the field where if I drop a trainer card, the game knows I want to use that card. So I'm going to go to my player object and I'm going to draw a rectangle that represents where I can drop the cards or trainer cards I want to use. So now let's see what this rectangle will look like in our room. And we get an error because we never named our object. So let's go back to our object, to not create another one. but change the name of this object to object discard and reload the game. So this isn't exactly the rectangle I wanted to draw, so let's fix that. And that's because I used room width here when it should be height. So this rectangle is my drop area for my trainer cards. So I'm going to code in the game, if I were to take a trainer card and drop it within this area, the program knows to compute the code for that trainer card. So far we have created our discard pile and we have selected our drop area. So now let's continue. The next thing I want to do is create a hand I can use to test this. So I'm going to re-add the shuffle script call, and then I'm going to force start with 3 specific cards. Those cards are going to be a base Pokemon, or a basic Pokemon, which is going to be Poliwag. The Bill trainer card that will allow me to draw 2 cards, and the Professor Oak trainer card. Now, what this is doing is forcing the 6th card from the top of my deck to be Poliwag, and the 7th and the 8th to be trainer cards. That's all this is doing. Another variable I want to create will be in my object card, and that's going to be remove from hand. So if this is asserted, this tells the game to remove the card from my hand and set it to the graveyard or the discard pile. Now we want to create a condition for these trainer cards. And we're going to do this one out of the loop, since the game doesn't need to check if it's in an open slot. As long as it's in the rectangle we drew, compute the code. So the condition we're going to do for this is, if it's a trainer, and it is in the center, we want to compute the code for the trainer card, which will be in this script call. And if it is usable, we're going to remove the card from our hand. And if it is being removed from our hand, we want to set the first position of our discard pile, or the next position of our discard pile, to equal that card number. Then we would like to remove it from our hand and then destroy this object. And then we want to deassert that variable. And I'm actually going to initialize it to 0 instead of -1. So let's make that fix. So now let's create these scripts. The first one is checking to see if it is a trainer card. So we're going to take in a argument, and we're going to call it card num. And if the strings value that corresponds to that card number is equal to trainer, return 1. And if it is not, return 0. So that's the first one. And the next one is checking to see if our cursor is in the center of the field, or if we have dragged the card to the center of the field. And the code for that is So as you can see, these conditions are very similar to what we put in our draw rectangle parentheses. So if our cursor is in between these conditions, return 1. If not, return 0. And the last script we want to create is the trainer script. So this script will have all of the code for all of the trainer cards. And the first thing we're going to put in is the Bill trainer card. And this is going to take in an argument that we're going to call card num. And if card num is equal to 91, which is Bill, we want to remove it from our hand. And then with our player object, we want to set the temp variable equal to our hand count plus 1. And if alarm 3 is equal to -1, alarm 3 is equal to 1. So let's refresh our memory on what alarm 3 is. So if our hand count is less than the temp variable, draw a card. So all this is doing is drawing cards until our hand count matches that temp variable we set in this script. So that's why we want to set this variable equal to our hand count plus 1. So we are setting the temp variable equal to our hand count plus 1 instead of plus 2, since Bill allows us to draw 2 cards, because we haven't removed the Bill card from our hand. So now let's test our game. So let's take the Bill card and try to drop it near this rectangle, and as you can see, it's not being used. But once I drop it in the center, it computes, but it isn't drawing the deck. The reason why we can't see our discard pile yet is because we never incremented our discard counter. So when it's drawing all the cards in our discard pile, it never knew we had more than 0 cards. So now that we've done that, let's see if the Bill card is sent to the discard pile. And it has been. So now that we've done that, let's create the code for the Professor Oak trainer card. So we're going to create an else if statement or condition, and if that card number is equal to 88, with the player object, we are going to initialize a new variable called temp3, and we're going to set that equal to our hand counter. Another variable called temp2, and we're going to set that equal to 0. And we're going to set our temp variable equal to 7. And then if alarm 4 is equal to -1, we are going to set alarm 4 equal to 10. And then we are going to assert the remove from hand variable. So the temp3 variable will store our hand count, because as we discard our cards, our hand count will change, and we want to store that value somewhere. The temp2 variable will allow us to count up to our hand count to drop the cards, and as soon as we have discarded as many cards that are in our hand, we will draw 7 cards. And all of that is going to happen in our alarm 4. So let's create that alarm. So if the temp2 value is less than temp3, and there's no underscore in that temp3, with our hand card at the first position of our hand, we want to set the next position of our discard pile to equal that card number. And then we would like to remove it from our hand and then destroy the card. And then we're going to increment our temp2 counter. And then we're going to set alarm 4 equal to 10. And then if our temp2 value is not less than our temp3 value, we are going to begin our alarm 3. So this alarm is going to be called recursively until we remove all of our cards from our hand, and then it's going to initiate this alarm and draw as many cards and draw these 7 new cards. One more thing I want to add is I want to add on to these conditions. So this condition right here will prevent us from doing any of the code in this event. So now that we have up to alarm 4 coded, I want to not allow the player to use any of the cards until all of these alarms have gone back down to their resting place. So I'm going to add a condition for each alarm. And then I'm also going to do this for our deck. And one last thing before we test the final code is, if the card is selected, I want to set that card depth to be the lowest so that it will be drawn above every other card. And then if it is not selected, I want the depth to return to the hand position. And we also no longer need to draw the drop zone. So let's finally test this. So I'm going to use my bill card, And I've drawn the 2 cards, and then now if I use Professor Oak, we'll see that all of the cards in my hand never made it to the discard pile. And that is probably because we never incremented the discard count in our alarm 4. Let's see if I'm right. Yes, I am. So let's increment that and retest it. So I'm going to use Professor Oak. And now you can see all of the cards going to the discard pile. And let's see that one more time. In the next video, we will also go over expanding the discard pile so that the player can see what cards are in there. So this will be very similar to how we did expanding our deck. So this will always be available for each player so that they can see what is in their discard pile and the opponent's discard pile. So if you're interested in seeing this, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, if you want to download these files, be sure to check out my Patreon. Until next time.